It has been about 3.5 years since I gave you my last update on my Carolina Skiff JV-15. In that time frame, I've used it quite a bit, and this spring, when the weather was very windy for days on end and I couldn't get out fishing, I decided that I was going to make some changes to a few things. The first thing I wanted to modify was my deck, my flooring inside. I have had two people slip and fall in my boat while fishing with me, so I wanted to address that firsthand. The original deck was fiberglass sprinkled with some bits of color, and supposedly that was to provide the non-skid. The second thing I wanted to address was my electrical system. I wanted to move the switch plate from the rear transom up to my console. The third thing I wanted to address was moving my console seat forward. So I moved it forward probably about 5 or 6 inches. It's a little too dark in here, so let me pull this boat outside where there's a little more light and I can show you the changes that I have made. Okay, what changes did I make? The very first thing I did was move the console forward, the seat console. It was epoxied in place and it was a devil to get loose, but I did move it forward about 5 to 6 inches. What I had experienced was that underway I was having to sit on the front edge of the seat and could not support my back, so it was not comfortable. So moving the seat forward solved that problem. The next thing I did was move my electrical panel. The original switches were mounted on this plate here at the rear of the boat, and if you were underway and you needed to turn on a switch, you had to actually turn around and take your eye off of boat traffic, etc., etc. So, and I didn't like it. It was just not working for me. So what I did was basically completely rewire the boat. I ordered a small piece of acrylic plastic online, cut it to my specifications, drilled the holes as necessary, and I used the same switches. That, as you can see, it turned out very well. I added a horn, which I didn't have before. It had a switch for it, but there was no horn. Navigation lights, bilge pump. I have 2 accessory switches. The first one runs an outlet that I use to man my cameras and charge my phone, etc. The second accessory switch goes to an outlet up front that I use to power my bait well. The original panel had a regular outlet on it, which I mounted right here. This is the accessory one, and instead of just a cigarette lighter adapter, I actually bought a 5-volt output. It has 2 5-volt outputs. As I mentioned in the intro, I'd had 2 people slip and fall in my boat, so one of my goals was to put on some new non-skid on the bottom. I originally just painted the bottom with a non-skid paint made by Interlux, and it was okay, but the surface texture was like grit, like sand. So, and also it was stark white, and my sides were still the speckledy color, and it just did not look good. So I decided I would go all out and just redo the whole interior, the deck, and all the sides. The product I used is made by Interlux, which I had used on previous marine projects, and it works out very well. It cures to a very hard surface. It's a polyurethane paint. I had to actually recoat the bottom with a base coat, 2 coats of base coat, as well as everything that I wanted to paint. I had to put 2 layers of base coat on. Then I followed it with 2 layers of the paint that I was going to use, and I just used a white. I had thought about using a darker color, but I've been around boats long enough that you have a dark color inside that it just gets hot. Of course, you have to deal with white, you have to deal with reflections, but that's why I wear sunglasses. After the 2 layers of finish were put on the entire boat, and by the way, I varied the glossiness of the finish. Like on the gunnels here, it's more of a flat finish, where inside you see that is a very glossy finish. So after the initial 2 layers, you let it dry for a few days. Then you come in and you tape off all the areas where you want to put non-skid. And you want for water to have a path to run to the interior of the boat, and it does not drain well across non-skid. So around the edges, as you can see, down the center of the deck there, along the edges here, down the center of the primary deck, you provide leeway around the console, again there, around the seat pedestal and to the back. After you've taped off your areas you want to provide non-skid, you paint those areas with another coat, and before it dries you sprinkle on a product that's going to provide you with the texture. I use this product here called soft sand in white medium grade. When you put on your texture medium, you have to put it on very heavy. I actually went through a bottle and a half of that. But after the surface dries, after the paint cures, you can actually sweep off the excess and you get a lot left over. And out of 2 bottles, I only actually ended up using 1 1/4. So I've got some left over for future projects. After your non-skid is set for a day or 2, I let mine set for 2 days. You want to come back over those non-skid areas with more paint. And you put on as many coats of paint as you want, and the more you put on, the less texture you will have in your various areas. I actually used 2 coats, and I'm thinking about a 3rd coat because it's still a little gritty. It's not so gritty that it scrapes my knees or anything, but I might put on 1 more coat to make it a little softer. One of my other changes was with respect to my ice chest. I upgraded my ice chest, and it did not fit the same floor space. The other ice chest was mounted on using these corner brackets here that you see, and with tie downs. I did not like those because I was all the time hitting them with my toes as I walked by. So I opted to get rid of those and go with a different tie down system, just using a turnbuckle system that you see there. That works very well. I like this new ice chest. It's an igloo, but the really good feature that I like about it has a tray inside. So if you want to keep your sandwiches dry yet cold, works very well. In my original video, I talked about the torsion bar axle that came on the trailer, and I was kind of worried about replacing the bearings when time came due. Even though the dealer said the bearings were lifetime, I found out that was not actually a true statement. About 3 months after making that video, I jacked up my axle and spun the tires, and I started hearing a little grating sound, so I knew I was going to have to deal with it. So I went to the dealer to actually see if there was some kind of warranty on that lifetime axle, and they said no, that the bearings were not replaceable and I'd have to buy a whole new axle. I contacted Carolina Skiff, and basically they would not respond to my request for assistance on paying for a new system. So instead of going back with the torsion bar axle, I decided to go with a standard axle, add normal leaf springs, and a hub that I could replace the bearings when I needed to. I bought all the parts that I needed locally, and it's worked out very well so far. Well, that wraps up my latest update on my Carolina Skiff JV-15. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Thank you.